The empty throne of Leo IV. Vatican had never been this cold. The night of Pope Leo XIV's coronation was moonless, starless, wrapped in thick clouds and a silence as heavy as a funeral shroud draped over a corpse. Pilgrims from all over the world flocked to St. Peter's Square waving flags and chanting his name, Leo, Leo, Leo. But when he stepped onto the balcony, illuminated by soft yellow lights, a chill crept down the spine of every person who looked up. It wasn't because of his otherworldly appearance, but because of his eyes. The eyes of someone who had seen something no one should ever witness. No one knew where Leo XIV had gone during the 3 days following his selection by the College of Cardinals. What was known was that he descended into the ancient library beneath the Vatican immediately after hearing the bells of election, and returned just moments before the ceremony began, his robes dusted with the ash of forgotten tomes, his cloak darker than the night itself. From that day forward, things began to change. The nuns living in the convent next to the Sistine Chapel woke up night after night to the same sound, 3 knocks at their door. Always 3 knocks, always at 3:33 a.m. When they opened the door, they found nothing but an open Bible on the cold marble floor, turned to the book of Revelation. On that page, smeared in red ink that smelled faintly of blood, were the scrawled words, "And the beast wore a crown, seated upon the throne of the holy, and from its mouth came thunder from the abyss." A young cleric named Matteo, assigned to deliver messages to His Holiness, disappeared one day and did not return. He was found 4 days later in a long-abandoned chamber beneath Vault 9, a room supposedly sealed since the 15th century, known to house manuscripts forbidden by the Church. Matteo was alive but speechless. He neither ate nor slept nor blinked. His eyes, frozen wide, reflected the image of an iron mask resting atop a human skull, placed within a circle etched in dried blood. When questioned, Pope Leo XIV offered no explanations. He merely smiled, a thin, blade-like smile, and quoted a line from the Book of Proverbs that no one dared verify afterward. "He who understands fear needs no further explanation." Then the cardinals who had voted for him began to die, one by one. One fell from the library balcony. Another died mid-confession. Another was found hanged with his own rosary beads. 13 in total. All were found in the same position, eyes wide open, mouths agape as if screaming, and left hand clutching a scrap of parchment engraved with strange Greek symbols. Ah. No one knew their meaning. The Vatican imposed a total media blackout. The ancient library where Leo XIV had once vanished was sealed indefinitely. But one night, a security guard named Giovanni saw flickering candlelight from under the door. When he pressed his ear to the rotting wood, he didn't hear turning pages or church bells, but the sound of an infant crying beneath the roar of flames. The next morning, Giovanni was gone. His body was discovered 2 weeks later, lying on the roof of the Chapel of the Holy Mother, arms stretched outward, his eyes sewn shut with coarse thorn thread. From that night on, no one dared descend into the underground vaults again. Rumors began to swell like storm clouds among the Swiss guards and the inner circle of clergy. It was whispered that Pope Leo XIV never left the underground vault on his own. Some believed he brought something back with him. Others feared he never came back at all. That what now sat on the papal throne was a vessel, hollowed and worn, filled with something ancient that had learned how to wear the skin of a man. A senior archivist named Father Eladio, who had served under 3 pontificates, began secretly compiling notes on what he referred to as the anomaly in the papal lineage. His entries described Leo XIV's speech patterns changing, adopting ancient syntax, sometimes muttering syllables from dead tongues. He stopped blessing his food. He stopped casting a reflection. Then came the morning when Father Eladio was found in his study, hunched over his desk, dead. His spine had snapped cleanly in half, with no signs of external trauma. On the parchment beneath his head were his last words, written in Latin, "Speculum tenebris resurratum est, ipse venit." The mirror of darkness has been unsealed. He is coming. That same week, an emergency conclave was secretly held among the College of Cardinals. What exactly was discussed remains sealed in the Vatican's highest confidential archives. But after that meeting, Cardinal Mazarini of Florence burned all documentation of Leo XIV's early priesthood, baptismal records, photos, even missionary logs. There is no record, he said to one priest, of a man named Robert Prevost before 1982. One night, lightning struck the tip of St. Peter's Basilica. The impact caused a brief blackout. When power returned, the statue of St. Michael inside the basilica had shattered. But what terrified everyone wasn't the statue's fall, it was what they found underneath its pedestal. A cavity containing a bundle of yellowed cloth, inside of which was a small mask carved from what experts confirmed was human bone. On its surface were words engraved backwards, readable only in a mirror. "Thou art not the shepherd, but the beast in shepherd's skin." That night, Vatican security reported strange occurrences. Clocks that all stopped at exactly 3:33 a.m., birds falling dead in the courtyard, and one guard found in the archives room, having gouged out his own eyes, muttering, "I saw him through the veil. I saw his crown of teeth." Meanwhile, Leo XIV began issuing proclamations, doctrines that seemed less like spiritual guidance and more like cryptic warnings. One particular homily, delivered during a rare public appearance, left the crowd in a stunned silence. The world was not made for man, but for the trial of man. And when the seventh flame is lit, the door shall open. Let none kneel then, for no mercy shall follow. The audio from that sermon glitched halfway through. The recording distorted Leo's voice, and in its place was a sound resembling hundreds of voices whispering at once. Technicians claimed no logical explanation. And still, he smiled. The Vatican began losing contact with several remote churches and monasteries, particularly those built on ancient grounds or near forgotten ruins. Monks from one such abbey in southern France sent a final message before vanishing. A single photograph showing their chapel's altar, where a pale figure resembling Leo XIV stood barefoot, eyes black, arms raised as if conducting a silent mass. The image arrived without explanation, and all attempts to trace its origin failed. The abbey was found weeks later, empty, its walls smeared with ash. Every crucifix inside had been turned upside down, not by brute force, but as if they'd melted into that position. In the Apostolic Palace, the Pope's private quarters grew darker and quieter by the week. Visitors were no longer allowed. Meals were left untouched. A thick black cloth was draped over every mirror. The Swiss guards stationed outside reported hearing chanting and voices not matching the Pope's, some deep and rumbling, others like children weeping in reverse. One evening, a brave young priest named Brother Thomas was granted an unscheduled audience with Leo XIV. What happened inside remains a mystery, but Thomas stumbled out barely conscious, covered in what appeared to be ash and salt. He had torn off his own clerical collar and repeated the same words for hours. "The throne is hollow. The soul was burned for passage. He wears Leo's skin." After that night, the Pope no longer appeared at Mass. Instead, recordings were played, cold, mechanical messages read in Latin, interspersed with long pauses and strange humming in the background. Those who listened closely claimed to hear names being whispered between the verses, names of the dead. Then came the miracle of the cracked moon. At precisely 3:33 a.m. on Easter Vigil, the full moon, visible above Rome, was seen by thousands to flicker and fracture, as if a hairline crack had split across its surface. Telescopes captured it. Satellites confirmed nothing was physically altered, but every person who witnessed it directly described the same hallucination. A throne of bone in a desert of ash, and a faceless man crowned with serpents rising. It was then that people began to flee. Pilgrims stopped coming. Vatican staff requested transfers or simply disappeared. The fountains dried up. The birds stopped nesting under the eaves. And in the middle of one mass held by a substitute cardinal, the marble floor of St. Peter's Basilica groaned. A long crack opened from the altar to the front pews, shaped like a cross turned upside down. There were rumors that the Pope had locked himself inside the Chamber of Keys, a secret room said to contain artifacts never meant for human eyes, including the Spear of Longinus, the Book of Seraphiel, and the Mirror of Hinnom. None who entered that chamber ever returned, except once, and what returned wasn't human. On the 100th night of silence from Leo XIV, the papal chambers burst open. Inside, the walls were covered in script, but not in ink. In fingernail scratches, written in hundreds of languages, both ancient and modern. In the center of the room was the papal robe, laid neatly on the floor. A ring of blood surrounded it. No body, only the smell remained. Not of rot, but of something older, metallic and sharp, like the air before lightning strikes. The Vatican issued no official statement. Publicly, Leo XIV was declared to be in deep spiritual retreat, but insiders knew the truth, or at least fragments of it. Cardinals who remained refused to speak of what they'd seen. Some took early vows of silence. Others defected, vanishing into distant corners of the earth, their eyes forever avoiding mirrors, windows, or even shadows. One bishop, exiled in Patagonia, wrote only one sentence in his final journal before disappearing. "We crowned what crawled through the veil." The world outside began to forget. News cycles moved on. No further papal addresses were given, and the throne remained vacant, yet untouched. No successor was named. The papal apartment was permanently sealed. But for those who remembered, who had heard the whispers, the fear never left. In 2030, a young Jesuit archivist named Clara Vescovi was assigned to digitize lost records in the restricted vaults. On her third week, she discovered a locked drawer in the Index Librorum Prohibitorum, a compartment said to be sealed since 1789. When opened, it contained a single reel of film, unmarked, brittle with age. Against orders, she viewed it. The footage, black and white, grainy, and soundless, showed a corridor inside the Vatican no longer in use. The camera, seemingly mounted on a dolly, rolled slowly forward until it reached a door carved with 7 seals. The door opened on its own. Inside, there was nothing but darkness, until 2 red eyes blinked from the void. Clara was found the next day, sitting perfectly still in the center of her office. Her hair had turned entirely white. On her desk was written in pencil, "He is still speaking, even now." The incident was erased from Vatican logs. Despite these horrors, Leo XIV's name remained etched in official church records. His portrait hung among the others in the papal hall, though no matter how many lights were fixed above it, his face remained obscured by shadow. Some visitors swore that his eyes followed them as they walked by. Others said if you looked too long, you'd see something moving behind the glass, shifting just beneath the surface. Years passed. Decades. Then, in the year 2044, during a renovation of the undercroft beneath the basilica, workers discovered a room that did not appear on any map. An antechamber behind a wall that had no seams, as though the stone had fused unnaturally. Inside, the workers found dozens of bones, arranged in a perfect spiral on the floor, all pointing inward toward a single object, a small silver chalice, filled with something black and viscous that refused to dry. Above it, carved into the ceiling in ancient Latin, was the phrase, "Ego sum Leo, ego sum nihil." I am Leo, I am nothing. They sealed the room, burned the blueprints. But it was too late. Reports began to emerge from across the world, churches experiencing spontaneous blackouts, crucifixes turning to face the walls, children speaking in tongues during baptisms. In Guatemala, a priest burst into flame during communion. In Poland, a confessional booth was found filled entirely with salt. In the Philippines, an entire choir went missing mid-hymn, their robes left neatly folded on the pews. And always at 3:33 a.m. Leo XIV had no funeral, no tomb, no known remains. Some believe he never died. Others whisper he never lived, that he was summoned, not born, a reply, not a man, a prayer answered not by God, but by something older. They say that in the dead of night, if you kneel before an empty altar and speak his name 3 times, not as Pope, but as he once was, you will feel breath on your neck, hear the rustle of old robes, and smell that same metallic storm scent. And then, just behind your shoulder, a voice will whisper, "We are still seated." And if you turn to look, you'll see that the throne was never empty at all. The end.